And the first one up is Department of Military Affairs, Military Affairs and Veteran Services. Welcome. That is the budget book in comparison between the governor's and the houses in case you need to look any pages. You guys start on page 236.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. For the record, I'm Major General David Michaelides, the Adjutant General for the Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services. I'm here today with Warren Perry, our Deputy Adjutant General. Just three broad items. First and foremost is we have a budget that met the governor's target and was approved by the House, and we have absolutely no issues. Item number two, if you look at the handout that we provided you all, that looks like this, I just want to bring up two clarifications on page 5. If you look at the top of that page, you'll notice that the top one is just to change the House Bill 2, where we're, one of our top priorities is filling our formations with the next greatest generation. So we have an enlistment incentive program. We're changing that dollar amount from $500 to $1,000, so it's a referral program. So if a currently serving member recommends someone to join the National Guard, they will get a $1,000 referral bonus if they're in the ranks from enlisted E1 through officer captain. And number two is when you look at what's highlighted on page 5, it also says it'll be continually appropriated and non-lapsing. So you just want to bring that to your attention. Then the third item we'd like to address is just simply at the bottom of page 5, where we're transferring 2 classified positions to unclassified. It's our director of the Veterans Cemetery, and it's the director of our community-based military programs. This is just clarifying sort of accounting line items, nothing more, nothing less. And subject to the questions, that's all we have. We have no issues.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, General. General, when you say you changed it from 500 to 1,000, will that require an additional appropriation?
No.
No. So it's just
Yeah. So we
just a change of the law.
yes.
Okay.
So and to clarify, Senator, that the appropriation that's in the current budget is $50,000 appropriation that was approved by the House and the governor and the governor's office.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. There's a bill working through to include Space Force members in the definition of military. Will that have any effect on your department?
No.
Thank you.
Senator Pearl.
Thank you. Welcome back. Excuse me. I'll try and get this out. Now, is this incentive, I guess I'm trying to understand, we just heard this bill in ED&A this on Wednesday. Is this in reference to the same language that we heard on Wednesday?
Yes.
And it's duplicated in House Bill 2?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
When the bill came out of House Finance, they just needed to clean the language up in both places. So it got added to House Bill 2, but identical language to House Bill 330, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no additional questions, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
General, Mr. Chairman, the General Main System Memorial High School graduate.
Is that right?
Graduate from the United States Military Academy of West Point. And I know his brother very well. So it's his son did a great job.
Well, very good. Very good.
Succeeded in spite of it all.
Yeah. It was a memorial, which was my great episode. Yes.
All right.
South side of town.
If the Veterans Home is here,
It's going to take 5 minutes to get to the back of the book.
I'll tell you what, we'll wait. Everybody watch Cindy. Kidding, Cindy.
Senator Brooks, I was listening to you, occasionally texting some questions, so just give me an idea of why I'm watching
The Senate, in the Senate chamber, has a rule about cell phones. Okay? I, as the chair of finance, have no similar rule. And members who need to go to their electronic devices to look up bills or check testimony, or just to make sure that their significant other is not so upset that they should stop at the flower store on the way home. You'll do what you have to do.
Yeah, I bet.
And I'll,
'Tis the
okay.
season.
Calculator, that's right. Just. And, and now that we've gotten that all out of the way,
Hello, sir.
we need to take care of our veterans. I may be there soon, depending on these guys.
We'll make
you know.
sure you have a room.
All right.
Alright. For the record, my name is Kim McKay. I'm the Commandant at the New Hampshire Veterans Home, and today with me I have Stephanie Kelly, our Business Administrator. So I have a handout here for you if you would like me just to go through. I can do that.
Yep.
So the Veterans Home, I'm sure most of you have been there. It was established in 1890 for Civil War vets. And we right now are licensed for 250 beds, but we are budgeted at 225 for 225. We have about 384 full-time staff positions, but we have quite a vacancy rate, which is further in here. And we utilize the VA grant program, enabling us to use 38 CFR 51, which they provide partial or full pay for our veterans. Our mission statement is the Veterans Home is to provide the best quality of life for residents with dignity, honor, and respect. We currently have a census of 129 veterans, 118 men, 11 women. Average age is about 83. I won't go into this, but in the handout you'll see there's a lot of competition about what branch you were in. It's if you ever come, they definitely will ask you, and you get judged on your branch from their peers. So I usually add this in there just for informational purposes, and also what conflict era they served, because sadly we're seeing a lot of the World War II veterans. Every time I do this presentation, I have to lower that number, and it's quite sad. But I have that in there as well. And then just some challenges and achievements this year, and they go in hand. One is that we want to increase our census to the 225, but to do that safely and responsibly, we have to increase our staffing. And so those have been our challenges. How do we address those? So I have some handouts in there as well with some real accomplishments we did this year as far as creating an LNA, a licensed nursing program, graduating people who are now working in our facility as nursing assistants. I have put a census form in here because if I was sitting in your shoes, I would ask, if you don't have 225 people, why are you asking to budget to 225? And I will say that we are right now, our census with our staffing that we can currently meet is 131, that we feel that we could do that safely. But we have 63 veterans that want to come in, and they're in the application process. So if today I had enough staffing, I could fill 192 beds without them know. Like, I think if the public knew that they could move more quickly into our facility, we would see that happen. But a lot of times they need to make decisions and go to another nursing home because we don't have a spot. So we feel very confident that we can hit 225, and that's why we are respectfully asking to be budgeted at that, because that's our goal. 35% vacancy rate for our facility, 51% vacancy rate just for nurses. LNAs are at 41%. And while the other departments are important for us to be able to bring more residents in, we can't do that if we don't have nursing staff to provide the care. So you'll see it correlates with our current openings that we have for residents as well. Revenue streams, we are general funded at 47%, let's see, 24 by the residents themselves that are at full pay, and 29 by our VA funds. You'll see on this is the daily rate. So veterans, depending on their disability, are either what they call, this is their term for the VA, basic rate or prevailing rate. If they are basic rate, which is the majority of our residents, we get one fee a day, a per diem payment. If they're prevailing rate, we get another. So we're about 13 prevailing rate, and the rest of our residents are basic rate. We do have 15 full pay residents, meaning they are over income, they're over 30,000, so they pay the full rate until they hit that threshold of the income. And I'm moving pretty quickly, so if someone wants to stop me, please do. Capital budget projects that were in this budget coming up is statewide drainage and water life safety improvements. I know that's not a big focus here, but these are, I want to mention them because they do have quite a price tag in our world. I know when I look at the capital budget request, we're probably pretty small. But there is water going through our building every time snow melts or there's rain. So we really need to address what's happening there to make sure it's not a bigger problem. Entryways don't have canopies over them, so we have to shut doorways down so people aren't using them in the winter because snow comes right off our building and it's a safety issue. And then we're trying to install phase 2 of our medical lifts, and those are lifts that go in the ceiling to help lift residents that need it instead of the old-fashioned Hoyer lifts. It's safer for the residents, less injury to the veterans, and less injury to our staff. Strategic plans, we want to grow the census with our staff. We want to meet the VA requirements. As of this morning, we completed our annual VA survey. The feds just left our building this morning, and we did an excellent job. So we want to keep that going. We have some health, life, safety initiatives like the canopies and the lifts. We want to do some vehicle and equipment upgrades. Our vans are quite old. And then we really want to work on our infrastructure for IT. Our veterans want to be able to use technology. And our building is really old, and we do have some federal ARPA funds that are helping with that. But we also are asking for an additional half-shared IT lead person. I believe Fish and Game was here yesterday and we are asking to share a full-time position so that they can come into our facility. We don't have anybody boots on the ground for IT to help work on the IT issues that are in the building or help foster the communication for the families. So we are respectfully asking to add that IT shared position at $46,000 for the first fiscal year and just over $48,000 for the second fiscal year.
They're gonna ask you how many of these are in the budget or how many are additional requests, so. you
This
might as
one,
well tell
this
me.
one we can absorb in our budget that we have right now.
5.
No, just, we only
That's
want a half a
The
person.
5th one.
Yeah, only one, yeah, half
Fifth
person.
bullet, 5th bullet, you can do it in the budget. The other 4 are
No.
additional requests. No, yes. See, that's why we asked the question.
Yes, no, it's half a position, one person shared.
Right, but on your list of strategic priorities, 1,
Oh, for add,
2, 3, 4, and
This is-
5, which ones of those are in the budget?
all of them, except for that one piece, that one
Okay, so-
additional, yes.
So 1 through 4 are already in the budget. It's an additional budget request for the half
Yes, sir.
person in 5.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And then you will see our budget as requested, and I'm gonna echo what the Major General just said. We have no issues. We put our budget into the governor supported it, and the House supported it with no changes, all the same, so.
And Norm Sanborn, he supports the budget?
Norm Sanborn. So Norm Sanborn is the best person ever. He is one of my favorite people. If you come to our facility today, almost every staff person and every resident is wearing a red shirt because it is
It's
Red Shirt Friday.
Yep.
Remember, everyone deployed. He started that in our facility, and I would be shamed. We would be shamed if we went up there like this. And he wanted me to wear the T-shirt today, and I said I can't wear a T-shirt to a hearing, and he said you can.
You could, see, because Norm Sanborn taught me how to be a moderator, so. All right.
Yes.
Questions from the committee members? Senator Rosenwald.
On page, let's see. Unemployment compensation. I think. No, forget that. My
I
question
got caught up
is-
in that too. I
No.
folded over a piece of paper because I was like, what is that?
Yeah, no,
That's not us.
No, it's not you. So we've heard over, the years that about 10% of your residents die every winter from influenza. What percentage of your staff gets an annual flu shot?
I couldn't give you the exact number, but we have no, you know what, one of the results for COVID is that we were masking. So we saw very, very small amounts of flu even this year because we're all masking. We still are masking in our facility. It is unusual for Stephanie and I to be sitting this close without masks on because if we were in the workplace, we would have a mask on. I would have to get that information and get it back to you. Do you want just the influenza or do you also want the COVID vaccine? Right?
Well, I'm curious about
Okay.
both, but
Additional questions? All right. Make sure that you tell Norm that I said hello.
You should come visit.
Well,
So-
sometimes my schedule allows me
If
to
you
play
can.
golf too, but
Oh, there.
and I haven't even been able to get there yet this
I'll
year.
put the offer out there at 10:15. We have coffee hour every day, and you are all more than welcome to come by. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you, sir. We still experience COVID outbreaks here and there. Today, we are in a COVID outbreak, but there are no residents with active COVID because they count our staff too. So if our staff get COVID, that counts as well. Yes, you're welcome.
All right. Public Employees Labor Relations Board.
Here I am. Good
Okay.
afternoon. Yes, so for the record, my name's Doug Ingersoll. I'm the Executive Director and Counsel for the PELRB. I've been with the board since 2006. As I'm sure everybody knows, we're in charge of administering the state's public sector collective bargaining law. I have provided a very simple, straightforward handout, which has an organizational chart, some detail about the specifics of how we go about the business of administering the bargaining law, some data about number of contracts and bargaining units in place. And then the last page, I've just notated 5 classes which have, in the terms of the scale of our budget, noticeable changes from fiscal year 23 adjusted authorized. But overall, for fiscal year 24, on the top of that last page in the handout, you'll see the increase in dollars is $20,000, which is 4%.
Just hold on for a second. Oh, I wanted to make sure the senator found hers. I apologize for the interruption.
That's all right. So overall, our budget request for fiscal year 24 is $20,000 or 4% over 23 adjusted authorized. And it drops to a little under $13,000 for fiscal year 25, 2.5%. And so below that are 5 categories where some of those are some of the changes which account for those differences. In Class 10 personnel, we actually have a decrease because we've had a retirement, some promotions, and currently a vacant position, which has been budgeted at the, I guess, the lower end of the pay grade. How that plays out with the current reclassification project that's underway, I guess we'll wait and see. Next item where there's a difference is in rents. We are in fiscal year 24, we will be in the second year of a 5-year lease, and the lease payment increases $9,000 a year for that year and through the end of the lease. This is the same space we've been in for 10 years, and this past year the landlord made a number of improvements. Most significantly, he installed a heat pump-based heating and cooling system, which allows us to do away with the window units, which were not effective, and were also extremely noisy during the hearing process. Next item, Class 27, the big increase there is that we've been working with DOIT to identify software that we can deploy for case management. We've been looking at this for years. Currently, we do a electronic folders-based system, which is simply a digital version of having file cabinets. It's a pretty complicated system. I'm the one who designed it, and supposedly I'm the only one who knows how it works, but even I get confused. So we've been looking at Legal Files, which is software that the Board of Tax and Land Appeals has been using for years. In terms of cost, it seems like it's now something that's within our reach. So we have included money in fiscal year '24 to not only get necessary licenses, but to convert our data and get the systems in place to use that software. And then that cost drops in succeeding years to mainly consist of the licensing fees, which will be about $6,000 a year, and a smaller amount for management and support from the IT department. There are also included in those Class 27 increases $7,000 for network equipment. That's all per DOIT recommendations. I can't really break that down for you much more than what you see here. Jumping to Class 30, there's a one-time expense of $7,000 to replace our hearing room tables primarily so that we have something that's more mobile and can be reconfigured. And then there's some funding in there for a partition. We're currently using in one of our offices a partition I picked up at White Farm, which is extremely unstable because of the connections. It's at the end of its useful life and is probably a little bit of a safety hazard at this point. Last item is Class 49. That's funding for the HRSU program, the Human Resource Support Unit through Division of Personnel. We've been using that program for the last 2 years. It's billed on a quarterly basis. We've been scrounging funds from elsewhere in our budget for the last 2 years, and this is the first year where we've actually put the funding in that's needed. Because we don't have the expertise in certain, when it comes to certain HR issues, they're a great resource to go to and have a dedicated staff that's familiar with us. Even with, well, maybe the most complicated things, when somebody retires, you would be surprised by how many moving parts there are to make that work out in a smooth manner so that the retiring employee ends up where they're supposed to be when their last day of service passes. So that's the high-level summary. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions?
I
They
should,
seem to be happy. Thank you.
I should just point out that what you see in our budget is what we requested to the governor and the House approved what the governor
Yep.
requests. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was an end of week sigh. Don't. Tomorrow looks good. It's, yeah, me too. It's the only nice day of the weekend. So we gotta be outside. Yeah. Where was this?
What we were discussing is the University System Board of Trustees has their quarterly meetings. And so they start on Thursday morning and then they go through noontime on Friday. And at Thursday evening, they generally have a dinner. And now they are inviting various representatives and senators to go to those meetings. So all of you, within the next year or so, should expect that you will get an invitation to go to one of the dinners and interface with the students and the faculty and the leadership of the university system. So
Boy, I don't know.
you don't know? Well, I don't think you'll have to worry about it too much. You may have covered a couple of those bases on the way. All right, time for the university system and introductions.
Great. Hi, I'm Jim Dean. I'm the president of UNH and the interim chair of the USNH system, interim chancellor, excuse me.
And good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Catherine Provencher. I serve as the Chief Administrative Officer, Vice Chancellor of Finance for our state's university system.
And thanks for the opportunity to talk with you this afternoon. We'll go back and forth between the two of us. I assume everyone has the handout in front of you? We're
We
good to
should
go
have the
there?
handout, and the book in front of you
Yeah.
is the comparison between the governor's budget. And if you need to, most people don't, but page 1548 is where your budget starts.
Thanks. Right, thank you.
Is that right?
Yes, I appreciate
Yes,
that.
it is.
I assume there's no symbolism associated with that.
Alphabetical.
God, I said, yikes.
The
Friday
first will be
afternoon it
last
is.
and the last first, right?
You Senator Curl.
No,
Okay.
thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. So we're gonna, I know you have a lot of people to talk with, so we'll jump right in. We've tried to make this a concise presentation and just give you the high points. We looked at your schedule for this afternoon and felt incredible sympathy for all of the talks that you're gonna be listening to. So here's the high points. One of the things that we really wanna make sure that everyone understands, both in the House and now the Senate, is the importance of the system for supplying the workforce of New Hampshire. And so we have some numbers there, almost 19,000 graduates working in New Hampshire in 2021 who have graduated just from the last 9 graduating classes. Thousands and thousands of people going into the workforce in New Hampshire every year coming from the university system. And part of that is because we have, as you see on the lower left-hand side, over 2,000 organizations working with us to try and place our graduates and help to fill the incredible gap that all of our business friends tell us that they have in terms of being able to get people to work in their organizations. One of the ways that we're able to do that is by offering internships, and some of the funding that we are requesting would help us to facilitate internships. And as you can see there with the 2X, people who come from out of state are twice as likely to stay and work in New Hampshire if we can offer them an internship. And it's a surprisingly high ROI when you think about it for a 3-month experience or a 4-month experience. Because of that, and because we have been offering quite a number of internships, we are the biggest talent importer within the state, of bringing people from outside into the state to become part of the workforce. On the next page, you see the headline, Reducing Costs and Supporting Students. Whenever you're requesting money from someone, it's reasonable for them to ask, how have you done with the money that you've had so far? And so this is a bit our answer to that question. We've worked hard to reduce operating expenses over $50 million over the last few years, which is really historic. I don't know that we've ever had that kind of a reduction in cost before, and it did not come easily. We've worked hard internally. We've brought in partners. We've had a retirement program, and that has also allowed us to keep our tuition flat for 5 years for resident students, which I believe is unprecedented, to leave tuition flat for 5 years. So that has made, I don't have off the top of my head what the compound inflation rate would be over the last 5 years, but it's reasonably substantial. And so it represents effectively a tuition cut against that expectation of inflation. We would love to continue this momentum, being able to keep tuition flat, but at this point we need your help. We've done pretty much what we can do. We'll continue to try and look at our expenses, and even today and yesterday at the board meeting that we're just coming from, we had the conversations about what else we can do. But at this point, we would really dearly love to have your support for continuing to do that. Go ahead.
So I'm going to take the numbers page, page 4. You'll see the actual operating block grant to the university system for 22 and 23 is $88.5 million. We had requested a total of $182.4 million in the next biennium for the operating grant, plus some additional prioritized needs. The House adopted a budget at 182.4 for the operating, ongoing operating block grant, and most of our additional prioritized needs. We seek support from the Senate for the House adopted level of funding for the university system. In addition to the operating efficiency request, it's called, we're asking for targeted funding for 3 places: to strengthen workforce so we can invest at Plymouth and Keene on those internship and business partnerships that President Dean mentioned, funding to ensure we can continue to hold in-state tuition flat, to keep more New Hampshire students here. And the last piece is specific to cooperative extension. Cooperative extension has reach all over the state, and we want to get the research that's done on our campuses out to the citizenry, and cooperative extension requires some additional partnership with the state to get that work done. So again, we support $95.2 million in fiscal '24 and $101.2 million in fiscal '25 as adopted by the House.
So if we are able to have the level of budget support that was adopted by the House, that will allow us to extend our tuition freeze for in-state students for another 2 years, and also maintain financial aid for New Hampshire students. This is really important. Our students are generally not affluent, they're not wealthy, and so being able to keep tuition flat for them and be able to offer them financial aid is really important for them to be able to go to college at all, and particularly to be able to stay with us within the university system. Second, the House adopted budget, the funding for the university system will help us, as we've talked about, to build and strengthen workforce partnerships in the Monadnock, Lakes, and North Country regions. I mentioned the board meeting that we've just come from. Having just come from Keene, it's hard to imagine that region without Keene State College. I mean, the vibrancy of the economy there is really dependent on a healthy Keene State, and they have been working very hard to try and be as efficient as possible, and again, would really appreciate the support from the state. And as Kathy already talked about, the cooperative extension program is really key. We have an aging population. We have people who could use help from the standpoint of the traditional areas of extension, but also some of the non-traditional areas. Just in the past few months, several of the UNH leaders and I have taken a bus tour around the state. We're taking another one coming up in another month or so. And what cooperative extension is doing in the traditional areas, we visited a couple farms. I guess one was untraditional because it was underwater. It was an oyster farm. That was pretty cool. But it was also an apple farm. We were able to see that. And we went up to the North Country and spent the night and talked to people from all over the North Country, Berlin, Pittsburgh, and so on. And what we're doing up there to try and be supportive of the population there is something that, as the president of the university and the interim chancellor, I'm really, really proud of. So that help, I think, would really be appreciated by all of your constituents. Moving to page 6, this is sort of an historical view of the appropriations for the university system. So if you've been around for a while, you know that there was a very significant budget cut between fiscal year 11 and fiscal year 12. Fortunately, because it was $100 million before and $50 million after, the math is fairly easy on the extent of the cut. We've gradually climbed back, and of course these are all current dollars, not constant dollars. So in current dollars, we're back to $88.5 million, as I think Kathy mentioned a few minutes ago, and we're hoping to get back really just to the funding in current dollars that we had in fiscal 11. And we've done some analysis of this, and we don't believe that there's any other entity within the state budget that is still behind the level of support that we had in fiscal 11. And Kathy, what's your estimate about the increase in the state budget over that period of time in the general fund?
I think that when we looked, and I don't have to tell you folks that have been here a while, there's been movement in and out of the general fund. But if I just take general fund in 2011 to 2023, there's been about a 6% growth. We're still 11% below where we were in 2011.
So that's just by way of adding context that we don't think what we're asking for is outrageous. We're trying to get back to where we were without adjusting for inflation more than 10 years ago. Then in addition, we have two one-time investments. The Blockchain Quality Assurance Center, this was something that we were asked by the governor to take on, and the House adopted this $1.5 million for Quality Assurance Center in a relatively new industry. The University of New Hampshire is very well equipped to do this because of the interoperability lab that we offer there. And certainly anyone who'd be interested in visiting there, we'd love to have you come by. And then finally, as you probably heard about the Whitmore Center renovations, we have quite an aging hockey facility there. We have put some money into it already. We just put new ice making equipment into it last year, but the center itself is getting quite old. We have both university funds lined up and private philanthropic funds lined up to support this. That would be in quite a bit in excess of the $6 million. So this would be a case where public support would really be leveraged by a great deal of private support as well as university support. So those are the main points that we wanted to make, Kathy, unless you wanted to add anything at this point.
The only thing I want to add is we have provided some supporting materials in the appendix. We're not going to walk through that. We want to provide opportunity for you folks to ask questions. But I always say the most important slide in your deck is on page 8. And should you ever have any questions, require follow-up information, that's our contact information. Always happy to have questions and comments.
Questions? Certainly, Senator.
Good afternoon. Thanks for being here. I think you're the first agency not to ask for a major increase. So thanks for that. But importantly, I got a text from an honors student I'm working with. She came in third in the URC. So that's really nice. Super excited.
For everybody else, that's the undergraduate research fund.
Yes, yes. So she's pretty thrilled today. She's looking at the effects of climate change on the ski business here in the state. But to a question. I'm interested in the workforce partnerships at Keene and Plymouth. And Plymouth, as you know, is very close to my district. And but both of these institutions, I think, are important to the state. What do those look like? What do they do?
Sure. So the partnerships are really forming alliances with businesses and creating relationships that make it easier for students to get internships and for students to get jobs. We have used university funds within UNH, as you know, to set up a center that makes that happen. Keene and Plymouth haven't had the funds that they would need to do that. And having staff in that area really helps to be sort of a broker between the businesses and the university to facilitate those things. We have, it's probably, I'm trying to imagine, it's easy to imagine, well, shouldn't that happen automatically? But a good number of our students are first generation college students, and they don't really have a lot of sophistication about how this all works. So having some level of staff to be able to facilitate them getting to those jobs is really helpful. And also, I will say, I think this is what's known as an admission against interest by lawyers. The university is not the easiest place to work with for employers. We're trying to change that. And one of the ways we can do that is by having people designated to work with business firms to make it easy for them to find people. So that's something that it would be helpful for as well.
Thank you. Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. These two one-time investments, are they funded out of fiscal '23 or are they next biennium?
No, I believe they're funded out of fiscal '23 surplus.
Thank you.
They are. Senator Pearl.
Thank you. I'll try to stop sneezing over here. Something's bothering me. First off, I want to just give a shout out to the Cooperative Extension. They've certainly been a big factor in the agricultural world of some of the successes that we have had. And I know there's a program that I may be looking for additional funding for around the mental health awareness it was an ARPA fund that established it, and I know it's working through Extension that they are managing that. But I will be looking to see if there's some way we can get some more funding to that to continue it on. Something you want to say on?
Senator, we haven't provided you with all the details, but mental health was one of the areas that cooperative extension, is in cooperative extension's proposal, if you will, for the additional state dollars.
Okay. There is a question from Senator Birdsell, who's not here, and I apologize, it may take me a second to get it here. She had a question related to an event that occurred, a pro-life event that occurred, and there was a counter-programming that was done by some UNH administrators that, and she was wondering if you wanted to respond to that and talk about why that, how that was happened, and if that was normal. I'm trying to find her question, and I'm sorry, I had it, but something
No,
else came
I
up.
think I know what the question is.
Is it normally allowed to organize a protest against students, as was indicated in the article? There we go, I found it, sorry.
So here's what happened. It's funny, we were, again, I'm sorry to keep referencing the board meeting, but that's where we've been the last 48 hours. And we just talked about that a bit this morning. The university system in each one of the institutions has a constitutional responsibility to uphold the First Amendment as a governmental organization. And what that means is that we need to provide opportunities for free speech by individuals or groups without any consideration of what it is that they say. As you probably know, if you've studied this, the courts have determined that we can limit the time, place, and manner of free speech. So you can't stand up in the middle of your physics class and start screaming about something. We're allowed to keep that from happening. We have facilitated events, I guess I would call them, on both sides of the abortion issue. The students requested that we move a pre-existing event that was organized by the pro-choice side to the same day as the pro-life event that was being held. And several levels down from me within the university, they initially said yes to that. As soon as we found out about it, we said, no, you can't do that because it will look like we're taking sides, which we never want to do. So the pro-life event went on. I got a number of hate emails from people who didn't think we should do that. I've tried to explain to them that what I just said with you, which I'm sure is not news to you, but I hope maybe it wasn't news to them. But both sides will be represented. You know, we do find ourselves in the middle of a culture war, for better or for worse, and I will say mostly for worse. We take our responsibility around the First Amendment very, very seriously, and we try to provide an opportunity for speech for people regardless of what it is that they have to say. And I know, and I suspect this may be behind the question, there's a suspicion in some quarters that the university is on one side or the other. We're not. If we do anything to facilitate one group as opposed to another group, we're in violation of our First Amendment responsibilities, which we take with extraordinary seriously, and we pay for it, for doing that. Some of the things that people said to me are quite hateful, actually, but I signed up for it, and I understand. But, I mean, it's the First Amendment. It's really just so central to who we are as Americans. And we have a sacred responsibility to fulfill that. And everybody likes free speech until someone wants to say something that they don't like. But that's where it becomes important, and that's where we stand on it, Senator. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that.
Well, thank you for taking the question. I'll thank you for Senator Birdsell for answering it.
Thank you.
Senator Ennis.
Just a quick comment for Senator Birdsell in particular. Having been at the university for a number of years, I can say that speech is not constrained. But I will also say that faculty are independent entrepreneurs, really, and they do their own thing much of the time. But the institution as a whole and the administration is doing the right thing.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank both of you for coming. Appreciate it. I'm interested in the movement in the nursing program. We did give you additional funds twice for the nursing program. You know of the demands for nursing graduates. How's that working out? How's admissions? How many more have you been able to enroll because of the additional monies that were given to you in the lab that was created?
All right. Well, thanks again for that support, Senator, and everyone. That lab has been simulation lab has been really important to us. And what we had committed to when we received the funding from the state is that we would double the size of the program, and that's in fact what we have done. If you haven't had a chance to visit the simulation lab, I'd certainly encourage you to do that. Nursing education has come a long way. In terms, my wife's actually a retired nurse, so she toured it with me, and she just has mouth agape the whole time she's there about what they're able to do now. So they have basically robots that can be programmed to be like in real patients. My wife tells me we used to practice on real people, so I think this is probably a step forward. But we've done that, and just today we heard about a young woman who's graduating from the nursing program who's joining a New Hampshire hospital, which we're incredibly happy about. We are currently exploring the possibility of additional increases in our nursing program. It probably would not be in Durham because we're pretty much capacity constrained there, even with the new lab. But we're trying to find creative ways. For example, there are people who are college graduates who could be nurses with about a year additional training, and we're looking into that market and trying to think of who could help us with that. So we're very excited about that.
What further question?
Continue.
Thank you. With regard to alumni support and outreach to alumni, how is that working out as we speak?
So the question was alumni support, and by coincidence, we've just finished what's called the 603 Challenge, which is our yearly focused fundraising. And if you're in any way affiliated with the University of New Hampshire and you did not get anything about that, then that's my fault, and let me know. And
I got it.
you got it? All right. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate that as well. We have actually every year increased the number of alumni who are making a contribution in that, including this year. And our fundraising totals have gone up increasingly each year. So we're very happy about that. We've made progress every year.
Thank you.
Senator Rosenwald, you had a question.
Thanks. In the nursing program, do you have a sense of what percentage of the students graduate and do stay and work in New Hampshire versus those that, let's say, go down to Massachusetts right away?
We'll have
and
to
make
get that
more
for
money?
you. Yeah, I don't know that number off the top of my head. Certainly, the vast majority of them graduate. Our graduation rate's quite high, and I'm not going to guess.
But the question is, where do they,
Right?
where
No, I
do they
understand.
go?
We'll get that for you. Sure.
Senator Ennis, you had an additional question?
One last question. Do you know of any other state universities, whether they're flagship or otherwise, that have held tuition flat for 5 years?
I know that Purdue, you may be familiar with Mitch Daniels, who became the president of
Yes.
Purdue. He's stepping down now. I believe that under his leadership, they might have made it to 4 years. I'm not sure they made it to 5 years, but it's a pretty short list.
Yeah.
To your,
Okay.
to
Thank
your
you.
point. Yeah, thank you.
UMass just announced last week their in-state rates, I think, are going up 3%, and their out-of-state rates are going up 4%. Their dining is going up 5%. Their res life is going up 4%. We're trying to get to a place where, we're not highest cost in the, and we're really making strides. There's momentum there, but as President Dean mentioned, we need some state support to help as we've chipped away our cost structure and kept our tuition flat. To keep that flat, we need some partnership and support from the state.
Thank you.
Anything further?
I guess I'll just say, well, first of all, thank you again for the opportunity to talk with you. And when you think about the university system, what I hope you'll think about is the thousands and thousands of young people who come from all over New Hampshire, who go on, who come from, in many cases, pretty modest backgrounds. Again, we don't have an affluent student body, and they go off to do great things, and we're really, really proud of them. Thank you for supporting them.
One last comment from me. We've got both you and the Chancellor of the Community College System here. I want to challenge you both to think about LNAs. We just had the State Veterans Hospital in here saying, I need LNAs. You've got a workforce there, people who like to earn an extra couple of bucks, whether it's this shift or that shift. So I want to challenge you to look at that, both the university and the community college system, and see if we can't find a win-win both for the nursing homes and the university.
Yes, sir. We'll get on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate it.
Well, the train's on time today, Senator.
Hey, it's probably because I wasn't able to go to the trustees meeting and make them late coming. So. Thank you. We'll just wait until they get the handouts passed out. Go for it.
Good afternoon, Senator Gray, senators, and thank you for the opportunity for us to be here. Mark Rubenstein, on behalf of the Community College System, with my colleague Shannon Reed. Try and be as concise as we can and leave time for questions you might have. Page 2 of the slide deck really tells you something about who we are. We're New Hampshire. We serve about 21,000 students a year, 93% New Hampshire residents, but if you know the Upper Valley, you know the Seacoast, you know the North Country, you know that other 7% is largely Maine and Vermont, and the workforce and the education, there's a permeability to that, and we're proud to support those students as well. That page also describes something about the ways in which we support students. Be familiar with our degree programs. Students in classrooms are increasingly online as well. But we also are supporting students through dual enrollment programs. This year, about 8,000 students in New Hampshire high schools, providing opportunities for those students to accelerate a college degree, but also to make it more affordable. For middle-class families, this may be the closest thing to real financial aid that they receive. And part of our request, as we'll touch on later, is to try and expand that opportunity for all students to facilitate timely, more affordable degree completion here in New Hampshire. We also have apprenticeships. And to the chair's question or challenge to us about the LNA program, we do prepare LNAs and medical assistants, and over the last 2 years or so, we've continued to grow partnerships to be able to do that. Also, as an illustration, in Manchester Community College, working with the International Institute of New England to do a dual certification, LNA, but also for English as a second language, helping individuals come into the workforce who otherwise would be on the outside, because part of the solution to New Hampshire's challenge for talent is to not waste it, not leave people on the sidelines. And everything that we're focused on at this point is figuring out ways to build bridges, pathways for students to optimize talent. And that's true for the high school students in our dual enrollment programs, but it's also true for workforce, because increasingly education is not the 2 or 4 years after high school. Education is a lifelong pursuit. You'll see in our budget request that we have included workforce development focused funding that currently isn't available for workforce short-term programs. Federal government Congress has been looking at the Jobs Act and at Workforce Pell. Those programs are not yet in place. We've asked for funding to allow us to help working adults bridge from roles that they currently have to careers that are more meaningful for them, more responsive to the needs of the state's workforce. Senator D'Alessandro had drawn attention to the question about nursing. You'll see in our materials over the last 12 years, we've prepared over 3,400 registered nurses here in New Hampshire in our 2-year programs. We've also prepared over 300 LPNs. With support from the state, we brought back through River Valley Community College the LPN program 3 years ago. River Valley, now in partnership with other colleges, is offering that in Littleton with White Mountains, is offering it in Laconia with Lakes Region. We'll bring that to Nashua Community College and to Manchester, figuring out ways to efficiently propagate a program to build capacity. This year, we're on track for about 70 graduates of the LPN program. It's a 12-month program, and one of the nice things about that is that it dovetails with the second year of the RN program for people who want to continue to grow, but by virtue of earning that LPN license, they're in the workforce now and able to respond to the immediate needs while growing personally and professionally. I also tell you about our nursing programs offered across all 7 colleges. You should be proud to know that over the last 4 years, and I'm waiting for the current year's results, but over the last 4 years, no state has consistently had a higher first-time pass rate for the NCLEX for associate prepared nurses than New Hampshire. That's our colleagues, the faculty of our nursing programs across the state, bringing healthcare support to New Hampshire.
Congratulations.
Congratulations to you. This is a good investment and a partnership with the state. Credit to our faculty and our students. Another interesting point about our graduates, you might know that our profile is not just 17, 18-year-olds coming through high school. We serve a significant number of working adults, but among our nursing graduates, 2/3 of our nursing graduates are 25 or older. These are folks who have made their way through all the hurdles that adults have to overcome to get back into a classroom, but have done it because this is what they figured out they need to be doing with their lives. So that much more of an accomplishment and credit to them. If you don't mind, what I'd like to do is probably move to page 6 in the handout, and if Ms. Reed wouldn't mind sort of summarizing the finances.
Sure. Good afternoon. Shannon Reed with the Community College System. The governor's budget included additional funding for the Community College System in House Bill 1, which, if you actually flip to slide 7, that's where that piece of it is summarized. In House Bill 1, per the governor's instructions, we had submitted a request that included a 3% increase to our base operating budget. We had additionally recommended funding to enable us to freeze tuition for the next 2 years, and that was included in the governor's budget. And we requested funds to help solve a piece of the state's child care problem. We have families adults that cannot go back into the workforce because they can't find child care. The piece of that we can address is the number of child care professionals in the workforce. And so if we can, each of our colleges has an early childhood education program. If we can help more students enter, persist, and complete that program, then that puts more professionals in the workforce, more slots for childcare, more families who can go back to work. And that is also in House Bill 1 as proposed by the governor and enacted by the House. The House also added some targeted funding for the community college system, and that is in House Bill 2. First is expanding our current dual and concurrent enrollment program, and that is the program that enables high school students in New Hampshire to take courses that earn for them both high school and college credit at a reduced rate or at no cost to them, and helps them get that head start on college, helps raise college aspirations, saves their families money when they eventually transition to the post-secondary system. The funding that is in House Bill 2 for that would not only expand the number of students who would be supported by this program, but also allows the community college system funding to be more creative in how we offer that program. So working with high schools that may presently be underserved by the program, finding those students who are currently not positioned to take advantage of the program, bringing more students in for the opportunities that program provides. Next is a Math Learning Communities program, which was added to House Bill 2 for $200,000 in each year of the biennium. And this would enable us to revive a partnership with high schools that helps to address the problem of high school graduates coming to college unprepared for math. This is a perennial problem. We've been trying to address it in a number of ways. Several years ago, we had federal grant money that we used to build partnerships with high schools, actually create courses to be delivered in the high schools that address those competencies that we knew students needed to be successful in entering college-level math. The grant funding went away, the program languished, It was successful, though, and so the House is recommending that we revive that program through dedicated funding that's in House Bill 2. There is $3 million in each biennium that the House has approved, recommended for what we're calling a promise program. And I'll let Chancellor Rubenstein describe that more fully, but it essentially is affordability and access for folks on the economic margins, having a hard time affording post-secondary education. And then finally, funded out of FY23 surplus is a $2 million appropriation for workforce credentials. And with this, we are looking at what are those high need, high demand, high skill programs that can be pursued through a short-term training, such as LNA. We've already actually met with some folks from the healthcare sector to talk about what are your most acute needs at your facilities in the state, and how can we find the people, create the programs or enlarge the programs, get those people into those programs and into jobs in our healthcare sector. So that those targeted funding investments are outlined on slides 6 and 7.
Any questions at this point?
Senators? They look pretty happy to me.
I like that you're working with Freudenberg. Thank you for that. That's fine.
Okay.
All right.
If I can just follow up on Senator Ennis' comment on slides. We put a lot of information kind of in the back of this presentation, but starting on slide 18, we've listed just a handful of our recent partnerships with industry, with companies across the state. This should give you a sense of the range of partnerships that we enter into, the types of trainings that we work with companies to deliver, the geographic reach of our efforts, and some of the impact that you can see in these partnerships.
Well, any other questions?
Thank you.
I think we're good.
At the risk of bless you, at the risk of overstaying my welcome, I'll only add one thing because we have focused on healthcare extensively. I'm as proud of the 600 automotive technicians that we've certified over the last decade, the 1,000 students with welding and advanced welding certifications, and the range of programs that we do that provide pathways to 4-year programs around the state. So I'm grateful for our nurses and our healthcare programs, but also proud for the work that we're able to do across the state's workforce.
And I look forward to both you and the university system, helping out and having an intense course for LNAs so that we can get some people there and they can earn an extra, pizza a week or whatever. And maybe we could do the same thing in the healthcare, childcare, where we have people who can't work but if we can provide them the childcare and the education, we may have a win-win there also. So just one.
We'll find that for you.
Senator Ennis has a comment.
Just a short comment. I want to thank you both for what you're doing. I've learned a lot about the community college system just from the short time we spent together. You'd think I'd know more being a university professor, but I think I speak for a lot of us when I say thanks for what you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the partnership that enables us.
All right. Thank you very much. And
The train is still on time.
we're doing well. We're doing well.
Well, that's Deb's great schedule.
Is the Department of Business and Economic Affairs here?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. It's Friday afternoon.
We've got up to 3 chairs, so there's no waiting,
Yeah, I think all you're gonna get is me on this one.
No, if you have other people, you can utilize the end there and the one next to you, whatever you want to do.
BEA groupies.
We'll start right after they get the presentations handed out.
While that's happening, Taylor, Stephanie Menard came in third in her poster presentation for the ski study. But
Oh, great.
yeah, I think you were helpful to her getting that started.
I asked her to send me the final version, so I was going to give it to our tourism staff.
Another month, she'll have it.
All right, cool.
All
Okay.
yours, sir.
All right, I am happy to be here. I don't have a whole lot of additional things to talk about today. Most of the provisions that the House passed under the budget that we provided were kept intact. I wanted to make sure if there were any questions from members that we had plenty of time to talk about those. I would say with specific regard to HB2 and the Invest NH program, I know Senator Innes's bill, SB 231, did pass the Senate, and that included a number of provisions, including $30 million of additional funding for the Invest NH program. That was what was in the governor's budget that was originally provided to the House. They took the $30 million number and reduced it to 15 in the House passed version of HB2. And they also made a change to the program in that they restricted the funds going specifically to municipalities. I don't obviously have anything against the municipal involvement in this, but under the original Invest NH program, we had $40 million, as I recall, that went into municipal programming for 3 or 4 different programs. Those funds still exist and are still available, and we are still working with municipalities and processing those grants. So if there was a concern over providing resources directly to municipalities, we do have programs that are in place right now that are providing that need. The $30 million that was in SB 231 would be used to add to the program that we made awards on in November of 2022, which was the effort to accelerate the number of available units, primarily with projects that are underway, or as we used to say, shovel ready. I'm not sure we really use that term anymore, but that program has been successful. We're deploying all those resources right now. And we are able to accelerate projects by providing that level of gap finance that addresses their increased costs, whether it's inflationary costs or workforce increased costs or capital costs or whatever that may be. So I did want to point that out. But beyond that, the only other component that I would also add, I know some of you have received information from SBDC and our partners at SBDC. We've traditionally requested $500,000 for that program each year in our budget. Under the version that you have in front of you, I think it's at $390,000 per year. I would just put in a word of support for our SBDC and our relationship with them. Our staff works very closely with the SBD staff and filling a need that otherwise our department doesn't need to be immediately available for. So I think those were the main highlights. Happy to talk about anything that you'd like to, Senator.
Senator Ennis?
Thanks for spending time with us this afternoon. A question about the SBDC. There's a federal match with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Follow up. And so the 500 will be matched with 500. What's the cap on that match?
I'm not 100% sure exactly what it is, but we have the match. The amount that we provide raises the amount that they're able to get from the federal government.
So we're leveraging $1 for another dollar,
At least,
up to something.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Is 500,000? What's the basis for that increase?
That's the traditional number that has been the target of the program that we have operated on the state side in partnership with SBDC. So the 500 is, I don't know that it's got a specific basis, other than that's the number that traditionally meets the needs of the SBDC in New Hampshire.
Maybe we'll break tradition. Thank you.
Additional questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you. Taylor, I'm very interested in our relationships with Canada. At one time, we had an office in Montreal. We maintained an office in Montreal. Vermont has an office in Montreal now. And the magnitude of our business, they're our largest trading partner. Is there anything in the works to do more? I know I'm chair of the New Hampshire Canadian Trade Council. We've been working with Sherbrooke, and we brought them down to see Dean Kamen's operation in Manchester. We did something with UNH, but are we doing anything to expand our opportunities? They're great trading partners, and what are we doing?
So, thank you, Senator, and I agree 100%. We've really refurbished our Office of International Commerce. We have all new staff in those positions. Adam Boltic is the chief of our international office, and he's been really ramping up the activity that our department does, focused pretty much, I wouldn't say exclusively, but largely on the businesses in New Hampshire, in getting small and medium-sized businesses in a position to be able to access international markets. A lot of that is in Canada, obviously. And to do that, we depend heavily on the SBA and the STEP grant process. We have one coming through right now that represents the largest STEP grant the state has ever seen. Because Adam and his team have really done a great job at putting together programs that are very appealing to the SBA. I would say that we also have an executive order pending from just before COVID that we have not fully executed yet on a USMCA trade council. And that would be a business-focused council that brings in Mexico and takes advantage of the updates that happened a couple of years ago now on USMCA. But that's just been a matter of between COVID and getting staff in place and moving those things on. So I do consider the international commerce end of our business highly underutilized and something that I'd like to see further expansion on. So anything we can do to support the efforts of your council, obviously we would want to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Senator Rosenwald.
You have two questions. The first one is on the SBDC. Would a $500,000 a year appropriation allow more partnerships with Army and that whole group of biotech industries that are in development sort of at UNH Manchester?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I know Liz Gray is here today, and she's the director of SBDC, and she and I were just literally talking about the relationship that they've got with Army and with the biotech sector increasingly, with funding from that organization to expand their capabilities there. So that, I think, funding probably helps them focus specifically on that. And then the funding that we would be requesting here would be able to continue to do the day-to-day work that we're so used to working with them on all across the state.
Great. And my second question, if I could.
Certainly, Senator.
The rest areas, boy, a lot of them are still not open or only open sometimes. And I think this goes back to the 2011-12 budget, but there's a whole lot more tourism going on in this state. What can we do to make the welcome centers be really more available for welcoming people?
We've had this discussion, I know, and I'm happy to provide this letter that I sent to the House Finance Committee just a couple of weeks ago on this subject. And the issue is workforce, Senator. I mean, pre-pandemic, we had 78 staff people to run the 12 rest areas in New Hampshire, and we currently have 42. And it is a constant juggling effort for our team at BA to keep all of the centers staffed and open all the time. So right now, we are in a position where we have all of the rest areas are open. There are some that, because somebody decides to not show up for a day, and then that center is closed for that afternoon. Then that's a very frustrating process for my team. We're paying right now right now the pay level for entry level is $14 an hour. And we saw that raised through the work of our staff up from $12 an hour last year. But again, we're having difficulty in recruiting workforce to staff the centers. And I would say that's our biggest challenge right now.
I follow.
Follow up?
So that's pretty much more than the liquor commission pays, which is $12.63.
Well, don't tell Joe then. Yeah.
So I'm gonna come work for you. But are there some, when you say they're all open, are they all open all times of the year?
Yes.
Or
I have right now, according to what, and I can give this to you, 7 days a week. Each day, Colebrook, Hooksett, Intervale, Salem, Seabrook, and Springfield are all 7 days. We have Canterbury, Lebanon, and Samberton at 5 days. That's right. Yep.
Additional questions?
One more, please.
Senator Ennis.
Commissioner, we have a letter from the SBDC a couple days ago, and I have to say, when I was dean of Paul College, the SBDC was there. I knew some of their work and impact, but in 2022, the SBDC supported almost 3,400 businesses and helped them access $44 million in new capital, $17.4 million in increased sales, and created and retained 760 jobs. That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Is 500 enough?
It's enough for me, Senator. I think if you have other thoughts in mind.
I'm just wondering, I want to know what the cap is on that federal match. And if we could find that number, that might be helpful as we go forward.
I think we can probably get that for you.
Thank you.
Well, the number right now isn't 500, it's 300.
300, yeah.
Correct.
And 390, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So 500 would be a nice increase. I agree.
Again,
I know.
I don't know.
there is a bottom to the pocketbook, so.
I understand, Senator. I'll leave those decisions to you.
And that this 110,000 would be matched makes it 220. I understand how that works, so.
We'll be sure you have that
I
information.
are an engineer, that's correct. We're not known for our grammar nor our spelling. Senator D'Alessandro.
Liz Gray is here, she could tell us what the cap is. Is there a cap, Liz?
If she's gonna tell us, she's gotta come up to the mic. Right here at the end. Yes, you have your own, hit the button.
There you go.
Sit
Haven't
right
done
down.
this yet. Okay, thank you. Lovely. Liz Gray, State Director for the New Hampshire Small Business Development Center, for the record. So this year in 2023, we are receiving $777,777 from SBA. They are our primary funding partner. They require us to have a 1-to-1 match of the $777,000. 50% is required to be cash. In addition to that, though, part of you saw in the letter from Army, they set aside $50,000 in their EDA Build Back Better grant. We would like to be able to use the additional funding to create a full-time benefited position to support Army and the biotech industry. So that would be a critical area of where we would be adding those additional resources. We would not have the ability to create a full-time benefited position under current levels of funding.
Additional questions? Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
So it's a pleasure to see you. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you. For the committee, our next group is supposed to be here at 3:15. I will begin promptly at 3:15 whether you're here or not, so please be prompt. We're back in, and Department of Natural and Cultural Resources.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. My name is Sarah Stewart. I serve as the Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, home to 5 divisions: the Division of Parks and Recreation, the Division of Forests and Lands, the Division of Historical Resources, the State Library, and the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts. I feel like today I'm going to be brief in my opening remarks and leave time for discussion. The headlines from this agency for the budget so far is very positive. We presented our budget, our operating budget, to the governor's staff in November. In his version of the budget, there was a lot of support for our requests. Same with the House. We worked with the House, and we're very pleased overall with where our department sits right now in the budget. I'm going to ask Chris Marino to walk you through the variances, and then we can save time for discussion on some of the items that we're looking at.
Chris, if you need more room, you can sit over next to, on the other side of her, that gives you the table in front of you.
Thank you. I think I'm okay. I've only got a couple of papers here.
We want you to be comfortable.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So in terms of variance explanation, unless I wanted to open first, do you have any specific questions that you're focused?
As I went through it, and so all these zeroed out things, they have to be a reason for that. My assumption was you consolidate, so you reference that. And the reference to all of these trusts, I don't have any idea where those monies come from, where those monies are spent. They're just named here. They're not, I don't think they're a line item. But,
The trusts themselves, Senator, are operating budget items have traditionally been. So if you wish to understand or have detail or see detailed information, there's the dedicated fund report, which is produced on a yearly basis, which outlines each one of those funds in detail, what the revenue sources are, what the expenditures, types, sources, and so forth. So that information is available to you. All right. Again, unless there are any specific variance questions, I'll just give a high-level overview. So in comparing our 24-25 budget, essentially comparing 24 to our adjusted authorized of 23, in the first instance, you'll notice the general fund, there has been an increase of over $2 million. And just briefly accounting for that, that is a combination of a couple of things. One, there are some increases in the administration office. We're looking to add 3 new positions to the department, which we have been able to offset with the elimination of other positions, abolish 3 other positions. We've been able to do that. Also, the Bureau of Historic Sites is a big change. In the last biennium, because of the shortfalls relative to general funding and the need to reduce general fund expenditures as a result of concerns when the pandemic struck, we funded the Bureau of Historic Sites with park funds for the biennium. We have sought to transition back to general funds and have been successful at this juncture in doing that. That's about $400,000+. We're also increasing our OIT budget. Most of that is just increases from the shared costs, but we are also looking to add a position, a support position from OIT to support the department. Right now, we have one individual that shares that work among several departments, and we found that it just wasn't effective for us. So we've worked with DOIT, and they have agreed to provide that additional position. So that accounts for about $900,000 of the increase in general funds. And then the other large increase in terms of the impact of general funds within the department, if I may, is related to an increase in the arts. We received a significant increase in funding within the arts to the tune of about $500,000 to help support and sustain the arts program. I don't know if the commission
And
wants to
that
elaborate
is,
that a little bit.
that is specifically to our grant giving in the arts. That is to increase our grant capacity in the arts, which includes arts in health and education, and also artists as entrepreneurs, which has been extremely popular. And there's increased demand that we've seen over the recent years, and that was supported by the governor and the House.
That's the general fund increase. I don't know if there's any additional questions or related to that variance.
They all look happy. Yeah. All right.
If I could, there's another just difference between the governor's original budget and where we are today, and that is he included $500,000 as a pass-through through the Council on the Arts to support New Hampshire Public Television. That did not survive the House, but it was a priority of the governor, so I feel obligated to bring that up.
Okay, I'm sure that he'll talk to me about it. Any other questions? Senator Pearl.
Thank you. By the way, I did answer your email.
Yes, and I think we are available on Wednesday, so I'll get
Okay,
back to you.
good. So I'm looking at the conservation, it's on page 786 in the big book, if anybody wants to look. Looking at the conservation easement stewardship. Have you taken on new easements that you have to manage? Because I see you've pretty much been relatively zero funded, and all of a sudden you've gone to a $125,000 budget. Is there new easements that you're overseeing?
Yeah, that was a newly introduced accounting unit, and I would call on Director Hackley to clarify that. This is related to the addition of the conservation easement stewardship account.
Come on up.
Which will be half general funded and half through agency income.
We have a seat reserved.
Thank you. So my name is Patrick Hackley. I'm the Director for the Division of Forests and Lands. So we are seeking in our budget a position for a conservation easement forester. We monitor over 63 easements across the state from Pittsburgh down to Monadnock region and all over, 290,000 acres in total. And we have reached a point where we continue to take on easements through the Forest Legacy Program, if you're familiar with that, but that's a federal program that provides funding to secure easements on private land, willing buyer, willing seller, and the state holds the easement as part of that federal program. It's been growing exponentially over the years, and we just do not have the staff to adequately monitor these easements. So in consultation with my administrators, it was agreed that we should have a full-time dedicated forester that will monitor these easements. Many of these are working easements, so they're managed with a forest management plan, and they have private companies are managing them. So it takes a savvy individual to monitor these easements and make sure that the landowners are in compliance. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any additional questions? Thank you very much.
They also have a sheet of budget adjustments, corrections. Just so you're aware of it, at some point we'll need your blessing to do this stuff.
I'll let you talk to it.
Yes, thank you. So we do have a few changes that we want to make. Mostly they're technical changes. In the case of one situation, what we have is we are currently occupying a building that we're paying general services for. It's owned by Administrative Services. We are actually going to transition, thank you, we're going to transition those divisions into the building, the headquarters building that we're currently leasing, which will reduce our budget by about $120,000. What we'd like to do is shift half of those funds into the grant line, keep their federal funds, and then use the other half to pay the difference in the rent for occupancy of the building that we currently hold. That's several of the top lines. And then we have two changes we'd like to make in the one, service park operations. We would like to shift $400,000 into the temp labor budget line in anticipation of anticipated costs due to classification changes, reallocation changes to those classifications, and general increases due to the pay raise and so forth. But it's a net impact with the introduction of the Bureau of Historic Sites being put back to general funds. The benefit that parks, the benefit will go to parks because they were funding it previously. We would like to shift that benefit into the temp labor line where the funds are needed. So it's a net zero impact within that account. And then finally, in Cannon Mountain, we would like to make 2 additional changes. One, same logic, increase temp labor by $200,000 due to anticipated increases that originally were not put into the budget when we submitted it. And then utility. We're getting close to the end of the fiscal year. We have a very good number in terms of understanding exactly what we expect to incur for costs for energy up there. And we've determined that we need 1 additional increase to that appropriation line in order to make sure that we cover it properly for the new biennium. That summarizes those items.
And I think I'm supposed to ask a question, how much is Cannon Mountain gondola system really gonna cost?
The tram?
Tram.
Thank you for that question, Senator.
Okay.
That's a lot of
I
excitement.
would have asked it sooner if I knew I was gonna make you that happy.
So, the tramway is currently in its 2nd phase. There's Tram 1 from 1935, then Tram 2, 1980, both supported by the state legislature. And now we're at the point where we're doing regular maintenance of the tram, and we're running the tram, and it's perfectly safe. But if something breaks at this point, there are no replacement parts. And so we need to prepare for Tram 3. The tram is a huge revenue maker for the state park system. Franconia Notch State Park is consistently one of the best state parks in the country, and the tram is a critical feature there. And so we would like to gain support to replace the tram in 1 season to reduce multiple seasons of financial impact to our revenue stream. And what we've talked to there's 2 major vendors of trams. I've learned a lot about trams in the last couple of years in the world. And we're looking at around 18 million perhaps for the nuts and bolts and computer systems. Right now, our tram is running on a floppy disk, which is awesome, and a museum will love it. But the expenses for the technology that goes with the tram is critical. I would like to say we're currently in the process of testing the health of the towers that currently exist, with the hope that we don't have to replace the towers. It's believed that they have another 25 or plus years of life, but we want to prove that. And hopefully that can help us come up with a more accurate price tag for the tram. So it's a little bit of a moving target right now. We would like to also make sure that the garages, if you will, the base and the summit buildings will be, will accommodate this modern equipment. So there might be some infrastructure work at the base and the summit. So it's a big price tag, Senator, and we'd like to tackle it all in one.
You'd like to punt on the cost. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, like I said, I think I'm comfortable to say.
If you had to replace the towers and you had to do the modifications to the building, what are we talking? And without that, what are we talking?
So if we could do the whole thing, the painting of the building, that's actually not just aesthetics, but for the protection of the metal, it was determined by DAS that it would be $25 million. So we worked with their Division of Public Works to come up with that figure. And then assuming that there might be, savings in the towers, which is what we're already working towards achieving that number, and piecing together any other funding source if we don't get the full $25 million is the puzzle we would have to put together.
Okay. Additional questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Department of Justice. I know.
What's that? Oh, it truly is. It's a violation of human rights. If you notice the last curve. It's late on Friday, Deb. We're just trying to maintain. You cleaned up my space. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
She keeps looking at the piles of paper on my desk and.
Yeah, shuddering.
Yeah. I can't survive in a world that's too clean, I guess. I need a working pile. And the Attorney General is looking well this morning, so everybody's got a handout, so we can begin when you're ready.
Thank you and good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm John Formella, Attorney General, and with me is Kathy Carr, our Director of Administration. I'm sure many of you know Kathy. She's a veteran of this at this point, but I'm happy to have her with me to keep me on track. So we provided a PowerPoint for you that will go through kind of that highlights the key points of our budget. At the beginning in slide number 2, you'll see just the overview that I always like to include, which lists sort of the jobs and roles of the Attorney General. There's various places in statute that lay out the obligations of the Attorney General, and we just try to collect them here in one place. The first, and perhaps the most well-known role of the AG, is to be the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the state. So in that role, I oversee the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice really serves as the chief law enforcement agency of the state, and we work with and oversee and coordinate all law enforcement agencies, local, state, and county. The AG also serves as the chief prosecutor of the state. As you know, the Department of Justice will prosecute certain cases on its own. That includes all homicides, or at least all homicides that could result in life in prison. We prosecute major drug cases. We prosecute public integrity cases. We do Medicaid fraud cases, and a selection of additional cases. The rest of the cases in the state are prosecuted by the county attorneys and local prosecutors. The RSAs give the AG the role of supervising all county attorneys. So as you know, county attorneys are independently elected, but the Attorney General does play a supervisory role in overseeing the county attorneys. We meet with the county attorneys once every other month, and we're in pretty constant communication with them on various issues. So it's a system that is somewhat unique in this state, but I think it works very well. When I talk to AGs in other states, they don't have that same coordination with local prosecutors, and I think we're fortunate in having that. Every now and then there's a dispute between our office and a county attorney, but for the most part, it works very well, and we work very well together. The AG also serves as the chief legal officer. So in that capacity, there's really two main functions. The AG plays a client counseling role, so we work with all state agencies, or almost all state agencies, to help them comply with the law, but also to help them achieve what they're looking to achieve within the bounds of the law. So we'll play both a bit of a supervisory function in ensuring that agencies stay within the law, but we also, I believe it is important for us to sort of serve as a guide for agencies, and we want to help them get where they want to go. And even if their first choice of direction is not legally feasible, we try to help them achieve their goals, but within the bounds of the law. The fourth role that I like to list here is sort of a general public protection role that the office plays. And that is distinguished from our criminal functions and our environmental protection functions because it's sort of an overall, we function in an overall parens patriae function where we can bring actions on behalf of the people of the state if there's been harm to the state. A couple of prominent examples of this are the groundwater cases that we've seen in recent years. So sometimes the Attorney General will bring an action on behalf of the state against certain defendants if there has been harm to broad interests of all state citizens. So our cases against ExxonMobil, or our case against ExxonMobil and other defendants for MTBE and groundwater is an example of that. The opioid cases are another example of that, where the Attorney General brought an action on behalf of the entire state against certain opioid manufacturers and distributors for their role in contributing to the opioid crisis. So that's the general public protection role. Then the AG, of course, also serves as an agency head. So in addition to all the traditional functions of the Department of Justice, we are a state agency, and so we have those administrative functions within the office that you'll see in the budget. And the final role is to lead the Attorney General's Drug Task Force. So statutes establish a drug task force within the Department of Justice, and that is composed of representatives mostly from local law enforcement agencies around the state who will detail their officers to the Attorney General's Drug Task Force, usually for a 2 or 3 year period. And those local officers will rotate through that task force. The state gets a benefit out of that because we have a task force that can assist with investigating our major drug cases. And local law enforcement agencies get a benefit from that because I think most will tell you that their officers get great training when they serve on that task force. They serve on that task force for 2 to 3 years. They go back to their local agency and they have experience that they didn't have before, and they can contribute that experience to their communities. So those are the primary roles of the Attorney General. I like to start with that because it just gives good context for what our budget looks like. On the next page of the PowerPoint presentation, I just have a very high-level overview of our org chart. We have a more detailed org chart that we could certainly provide to you, but for budget purposes, this is how our org chart looks in the budget. And you'll see that there is a fairly small administrative block in the Attorney General's office. It has a total of 12 positions. That includes the AG, the Deputy AG, Kathy Carr, the Director of Administration, a couple of staffers or staff positions, and then I believe part of the business office is made up within the administration block. On the left, you'll see the Division of Public Protection and how that's laid out in the budget. The office's primary function at the end of the day is public protection, and that is reflected in our budget. That's by far the biggest component of the office, and so there are 90 total positions within the Division of Public Protection. The Division of Legal Counsel is traditionally thought of as the sort of the more civil side of the office. That's civil litigation and client counseling. That is a total of 49 positions in the budget. It's certainly a very, very important function of the office, but it's less robust than the public protection function. And then we also have the Office of Chief Medical Examiner. That has 7 total positions, and then we have a Division of Grants Management. And our Grants Management unit both applies for and manages grants for the Department of Justice, but we also sub-grant out a lot of money to other state and local agencies, mostly within the law enforcement community. So that's a very high-level view of our org chart and how kind of the budget looks from an org chart perspective. On page 5 of the PowerPoint, we thought it'd be helpful just to provide, again, a very high-level view of our total budget and the change between fiscal year 23 and then 24 and 25. You'll see that for fiscal year 2023, we were approved for a total of roughly $40.4 million, $40,390,064,000. As the budget is presented to you today, with the input of the governor and the House, our budget would increase to $43,879,207 in fiscal year 24 and $45,129,473 in fiscal year 25. On a percentage basis, that represents from 23 to 24 about an 8.6% increase, and from 24 to 25 another 2.8% increase. So all total from 23 to 25, it's roughly an 11.7% increase. So that is certainly a significant increase, but I would point out that it is, given the overall increase of the budget at this point, we are certainly well below the average increase across state government, because I believe right now the budget reflects, as it came to you, an overall increase of about 17 or 18%. So for our department, we're below that mark. I would also note that, and we'll see this as we move on to the next page, that highlights our major general fund increases. I would note that one major part of our increase, which is roughly $600,000 to $700,000, is the rent for our new building. So if you were to take that out, given that that doesn't really reflect an expansion of the department, or an even smaller overall increase. So I feel pretty proud to say that while our budget is going up, at this point it's going up substantially less than many other departments. So on this page where we highlight our major general fund increases, in the budget right now we have some additional resources to prosecute elder abuse and exploitation cases. That's a new elder fraud attorney, a new investigator, and a new investigative paralegal. So that's one major component of our increase. We have some additional general funds for the YDC criminal investigations. You might recall that 2 years ago, we came to fiscal to request 6 temporary positions to assist with the YDC criminal investigation using ARPA funds. We expect that those ARPA funds will run out somewhere around the end of the first year of the next biennium. And so in the governor's budget, we requested general funds to carry those positions during the second year of the upcoming biennium. These are temporary positions, so I think it is very safe to view this general fund increase as temporary. We're not ready to give these positions up now, but what we have started to do with the YDC investigation is spread that work throughout the rest of the criminal bureau. So I do anticipate that by the end of the next biennium, we will not need these 6 temporary positions. We may ask to extend a couple of them, but we're certainly not going to need 6. So as we absorb that work into the rest of the criminal bureau, we're trying to alleviate the need for those temporary positions, but they've certainly been helpful as we scaled up quickly for that investigation over the last 4 years. The third big increase in general funds came from a realignment of some positions that had been moved on to the Consumer Escrow Fund. If you're familiar with the Department of Justice budget, you'll know that our Consumer Protection and Antitrust Bureau is funded through the Consumer Protection Escrow Fund. That fund, money that comes into that fund is from fines and penalties from consumer protection actions, but a big source of that money comes from multi-state investigations where we join with other states to investigate various targets and defendants for all range of bad conduct that affects consumers. And then we often get fairly large settlements from those cases. You know, that it kind of goes up, it goes down, it's never constant, but usually if you average out on a year-to-year basis, we bring in, you know, several $1 million, oftentimes more, into the Consumer Escrow Fund. That fund funds the Consumer Protection Bureau. One thing that had happened over the years, which I think was a result of a temptation to move positions off the general fund, an understandable temptation, but probably not a good long-term idea, is that positions that were not part of the Consumer Protection and Antitrust Bureau were moved onto the Consumer Escrow Fund. So we had positions that were being funded out of that escrow fund that really weren't related to consumer protection. In this budget, I proposed to the governor and he approved moving those 5 positions back onto the general fund, just because I think that's better structurally for a couple of reasons. One is that it doesn't hide general fund positions in another funding source, but the other is that the Consumer Escrow Fund, while I think we typically can count on it being sufficient to fund the Consumer Protection Bureau, it's a mistake to start to rely on that fund to fund other things in the office, because it's really only the consumer protection positions that are working to bring in money. So if you start having only a few positions and you start counting on only a few positions to bring in money for other parts of the office, I think you set yourself up for potential pain down the road. But that has resulted in this proposed budget in a general fund increase. But essentially what we're doing is absorbing what I think is necessary pain for the general fund now, but then we'll carry that forward. Ultimately, I think it's safe to say financially, it's kind of a wash, because at the end of the day, whatever extra money is in the consumer escrow fund above and beyond the current $5 million cap, it goes back to the general fund anyway. So moving these positions is just a way to ensure that we don't end up overloading the escrow fund in a year when maybe we don't bring in quite as many multi-state settlements. But in a year where we bring in way more than we need, that money will go back to the general fund anyway. Happy to answer more questions about that. I know it's a little, perhaps a little confusing.
Senators have questions on that issue? Senator Rosenwald.
Thanks. I have a couple, actually.
Yep.
We generally bring, I looked at the history of the escrow fund, and I know
Yep.
we bring in more than $5 million a year.
Yep.
So my understanding is that the financial fraud funding you have is going to run out in the middle of the biennium. Would you be looking to then fund the financial fraud unit as part of that consumer escrow account?
Yes. So that was another reason to move the non-consumer positions off of the consumer escrow account. The financial fraud positions, that money will run out in the middle of the biennium. But the financial fraud positions, they really are consumer protection related positions. But yes,
Could I
thank you.
Follow up?
So do we have anybody who's doing cyber crime?
We really do not at this point. And I know we've had that conversation as part of SB 255 and a potential need for additional resources there, but we have not traditionally gotten into that area. I think it's an area we should get into, but I know Brandon Garrett, our consumer protection chief, has appeared before the House and Senate and made the case that if we're going to start to push into that area, we could really use some additional resources for that.
So
Additional question?
I do. So if we let you, let's say in the second year, keep more money, knowing that we bring in more than $5 million a year, would you be able to hire a couple of people to investigate cybercrime? I mean, we've heard from DOIT that every day he's fending off attacks.
Yeah.
Is that a reasonable thing to do? Would you be able to find someone?
I do believe we could fill positions like that. Obviously, everybody in state government is struggling a bit with recruitment and retention, some agencies more than others. So it may take us a little time, but I can tell you, talking to my colleagues around the country, other AGs, this is a growing area. And I do think we could find individuals to fill, say, an attorney position, an investigator position, an investigative paralegal position. Yes.
Thank you.
Continue, please.
All right. I mentioned the DOJ headquarters lease as a general fund increase, and then the last category of increase, which I think is typical in a budget, are new permanent positions, and we list those on the next page. So we do have some new positions that are currently in the budget. One, which I already mentioned, is a new elder fraud attorney. We also have one new general criminal attorney. General criminal attorneys in the office, they tend to focus on homicide cases, but they'll also take some cases from other parts of the criminal bureau. We've seen an uptick in homicides over the past couple of years, and we also have a trial backlog from COVID that is really starting to come home to roost. We have a heavy trial schedule for the rest of this year. We expect we'll have that for at least the next 2 to 3 years. So that's where the general criminal attorney request comes in. We have a new environmental protection attorney in the budget. One of the major features of ARPA was a lot of money for environmental projects. And so in talking with DES, we really felt that we could use an additional attorney in that bureau, not only to help with our traditional environmental protection functions, but that bureau also plays a client counseling role to DES. And so to help manage the work for a lot excuse me, for a lot of those new projects, which we expect will, will create a need that will last at least for the next few years. The other new workload on the Environmental Protection Bureau is the Department of Energy. That was a new department created in the last budget, and the Department of Environmental Services actually serves as the client counseling bureau for the new Department of Energy. So all that led us to just request one additional attorney in the Environmental Protection Bureau. The Transportation and Construction Bureau is confusingly named because it represents both the Department of Transportation and the Department of Safety. We've requested, and it's in the budget now, an additional attorney for that bureau. We've seen a couple things that have led to an increased workload in that bureau. One is a lot of the criminal justice reform initiatives over the last few years. Because that bureau represents the Department of Safety and represents the Department of Safety in a client counseling role, a lot of the work on those initiatives that the office has done has been done by that bureau. Matt Broadhead, the head of that bureau for us, who's an excellent lawyer, has been great at spearheading a lot of that work, but that is an additional workload on that bureau that could really, that would contribute to our asking for another attorney in that bureau. That bureau has also seen an uptick given, again, a lot of money for various projects that will play out over the next few years. The infrastructure bill, federal infrastructure bill that passed, I believe it was last year, that's resulting in a lot of additional funds coming into the state, a lot of projects that DOT is supervising, and given that we play a client counseling role to the Department of Transportation, that also has led to an increased workload for that bureau. So that's what led to our request for an additional attorney there. And then we've had a heavy, heavy load of civil litigation the last couple of years. I expect that to continue in the coming years, and that's what led to our request for an additional civil litigation attorney. So all those positions are in the budget now. We are not asking that those be added to what you see before you. Those are in the budget as it appears before you now. Again, I mentioned the elder fraud positions, but here we list an additional investigator position for elder abuse and exploitation. It's one of our new position requests. And then we have a number of new support staff requests. The most important of those by far is a request for a new human resources coordinator position. I was surprised to learn when I got to the Department of Justice, we really don't have a dedicated HR officer in the department. The chief of staff, the Attorney General's chief of staff has been playing that role. He does a great job, and chiefs of staff before him have done a great job, but the chief of staff at the DOJ is an attorney and also does a lot of legal work. And I felt that it would be very helpful for the office to have a non-attorney HR professional really coordinating the HR functions of the office, especially given the size that the office has grown to over the years. So that's what led to that request. The grants manager position is just a conversion from part-time to full-time, so it's not a request for a full new position. It's really kind of a request for an additional half position to convert that to full-time. We have in the budget before you a new victim witness advocate position. The overall increased burden on the Criminal Justice Bureau has quite frankly led to what I think is an overdue request for a new victim witness advocate. Our Office of Victim Witness Assistance has grown a lot more slowly than the rest of the Criminal Bureau over the years, and our victim witness advocates do amazing work. They're very dedicated, but they are getting strained, and they are also 24/7 positions. If something happens in the middle of the night, if we have a tragic situation where someone's killed in the middle of the night, it's not just the prosecutors who are on call that night who go out, the victim witness advocate goes out. So that's what's led to our request for an additional victim witness advocate. We also have a request for an additional victim witness program specialist. That position is part of the Office of Victim Witness Assistance. It's not an advocate position, but that position helps manage a lot of the programming and education we do for victim protection and victim services around the state. So there's a lot of additional emphasis and a lot of additional workload on the victim victim program front for a couple of reasons. One is that, again, coming out of COVID and the backlog, we also sort of have a backlog in in-person training for victim service professionals around the state. So we're sort of catching up with that, and that's a lot of work that falls on that office. And the second piece I would say is that a lot of the various criminal justice reform and other discussions that we've had over the last few years, there's a lot of, or I should say, in some ways, I think sometimes we miss the victim's perspective in those discussions. And I think our program, we need to make sure our programming and our trainings and everything else we do, that we work in consideration for victims. And I think having an additional victim witness program or a victim program specialist would be helpful with that. The civil paralegal and civil legal assistant positions, those just go to supporting the civil litigation unit and in the increase in civil litigation that I mentioned earlier. In many ways, having additional support staff in that unit is more important than additional attorneys, because the support staff, they do critical work, and they if you have really, really good support staff, you can actually get by with less lawyers. They provide such a critical function. And again, traditionally the office has expanded attorney positions or saved attorney positions at the expense of support staff positions. I would tell you honestly, sitting here today, I think that's been a mistake, and so we're trying to catch up on that a little bit. And that's why in the civil litigation unit, I'm actually advocating that we add one lawyer, but two support staff positions. The elder fraud investigative paralegal, that's part of the additional elder fraud resources I mentioned earlier. And then,
And because that's probably cyber, you'll get both.
and then there's an additional legal assistant position we have, which is not a new position to state government. It's a transfer of a position from the Department of Environmental Services to the Department of Justice. That transfer is happening due to the fact that we are going to take on the hearing officer function for some of the matters that come before the Department of Environmental Services. The reason being, which I think is a good one, that you shouldn't, if someone is challenging a decision of one department, the hearings officer who hears those challenges should probably be in a different department. There is one other request that I would like to just put forward that is not a request for a new position, but we do have an attorney position in the office that is funded by the PUC, but it's within the DOJ, and that attorney provides support to the Public Utilities Commission. Right now, it is a temporary position, but now that we've had this position for 2 years, I think we have seen that there's going to be a permanent need for that position, given that the Public Utilities Commission was made a lot smaller in the restructuring when the Department of Energy was created. So we would request to make that a permanent position. That is, not to downplay the significance of that, but that's sort of really a matter of semantics more than anything, because at the end of the day, no position is permanent. If you decide to cut it, if you put it in now and decided to cut it in 2 years, it would be cut just as much as a temporary position would be cut. But it gives the attorney who's in that position at least a little bit more confidence that what they're doing is not just a temporary need. We see it, at least for now, as a need that we expect to continue forward, and I think that need will continue forward. So that's the one additional request we're putting forward in this phase of the budget, is only to convert that position from temporary to permanent. That doesn't involve any new funds. So I just put that forward for consideration. The last positions here are 10 new assistant deputy medical examiner positions. I would just, to maybe ease your immediate reaction to that, these would be new positions, but not new people. Right now, our assistant deputy medical examiners are contractors. We have probably 23 contractors who serve as assistant deputy medical examiners. I've had a lot of conversations with Dr. Duval, the chief medical examiner, and Dr. Weinberg, the deputy chief medical examiner, and they really believe that it would be a better structure for that office to have 10 full-time employees who are assistant deputy medical examiners, as opposed to having 23 contractors. There are a few reasons for this. One is that the IRS over the years has time after time expressed some concern over this structure. They've never come out and said definitively that we believe, or that the IRS has never said, we believe these individuals really are employees and not independent contractors. But that risk remains, that eventually they will say that. It also can be difficult for the chief medical examiner, the deputy chief medical examiner, to manage individuals who are not actually their employees. They have 23 separate contracts with 23 separate people, so everyone is a contractor. Everyone has each individual has their different asks and their different interpretations of their contracts. So you sort of have 23 separate transactions going on there, and that's an administrative burden. We have less of an ability to make sure different parts of the state are covered when the ADMEs are independent contractors. If we had them as employees, we could shift them around and just say, right now we need somebody else in COAS, you're going to cover COAS. Right now we need somebody else in Cheshire or Sullivan, you're going to cover Cheshire or Sullivan. When these individuals are independent contractors, it's harder to do. And then because we have 23 independent contractors, we do see that sometimes they'll compete with each other, right? That some want more time, some want more cases, and that just becomes difficult to manage. We really think at the end of the day, it would be more effective to have a team that are 10 employees, 10 ADMEs that work for the state. At the end of the day, it will actually reduce the number of people that are being paid by the state to do this function. I think it will reduce administrative costs. It will ultimately be more efficient. And I will just be perfectly honest, I am not a medical examiner. I don't do autopsies. And at the end of the day, I try to know what I don't know. And if our chief medical examiner and our deputy chief medical examiner are recommending that this is a better structure that will better serve the state for what is a very critical function, I take that as pretty significant. So that's why we've put that forward. Again, that is in the budget now, so we're not asking for that as a new request for you to take up. It's in the budget now, but we think that overall it would be better. And if anything, it would actually cost a little less. It'll be at least cost neutral and probably cost a little less money than the current arrangement that involves independent contractors. So on the following slides, and I'll just run through these quickly, we wanted to highlight a little bit the reasons for expanding our efforts on the elder abuse and financial exploitation front. The first is a pretty jarring stat, and that is the fact that 1 in 10 older adults are victimized every year. Only 1 in 24 of those incidents are reported. The reasons for this span the spectrum, but one thing that we found, that I've even seen in my 2 years as AG, and that I've heard from people in a number of different contexts, not just in this context, but when it comes to reporting hate crimes, other incidents that go unreported, is that when people don't think that anyone's going to do something about harm that's done to them, they're less likely to report. The other reason, of course, is just embarrassment. A hit to pride. I can tell you that my own father was a victim of a fairly minor scam, but to this, he mentions it to this day. I mean, there's just a lot of embarrassment there. I can't believe I fell for that. I can't believe I fell for that. And so, these incidents go unreported. So that's one reason to send a message that we're taking this seriously. The next slide highlights another pretty startling statistic, but I think what is leading to an increase in elder abuse and exploitation cases, and that is that the boomer generation, age 58 to 75 roughly, they have significant assets. And the generation coming up behind them, and I won't get into the reasons for this, that's not the point of the presentation, but the generation coming up behind them has significantly less assets. And so what that leads to is parents or other either parents or nieces and nephews. A lot of the exploitation cases we see are children exploiting their parents, nieces and nephews exploiting their aunts and uncles. It's a sad fact, but that's what we're seeing. So that's leading to a real increase in elder abuse and exploitation. And then another reason that I don't include in here, but that I think has really contributed to this is the major advances in technology that we've seen over the last 20 years. I think that combined with some of these other facts has really led to an increase in elder abuse and exploitation, because when an older generation doesn't understand new technologies like social media platforms and other things, email, there's a lot of ways to put together very clever and advanced scams with new technology. So anything from a less technologically reliant scam like calling up someone in their 80s and saying that their grandchild has been arrested and you need $10,000 to bail them out, all the way to emails and other social media communications that pose as somebody else that are really deceptive. It's something any of us could fall for, frankly. It really doesn't matter your age, but that has led to an increase in elder abuse and exploitation. And it's reflected in the numbers. There are a lot of ways we hear about cases of elder abuse and exploitation, but law enforcement referrals are, I would say, the most reliable source. And between 2017, 2018, and 2021, 2022, even with the reluctance to report, we've seen a pretty substantial increase, as you'll see here, from 758 to 1,032. And I think that probably underestimates the problem pretty significantly. But even with the reluctance to report, we're still seeing a significant increase in the numbers. So that's really that's sort of the thrust behind the expansion of that effort. And we include that here because out of all the things we're asking for as far as additions in our budget, I would say there's nothing more important than that. I don't want to say there's nothing as important, but there's certainly nothing more important than that. The last couple of slides we have here in our presentation, and then happy to take any questions you have, of course. I just have some numbers here that reflect the various functions of the office, and so I won't go through each of them, but it just shows you that the office does a lot. I would venture to say that for $43 million in the first fiscal year of the biennium and $45 million in the second fiscal year of the biennium, I think there's no bigger bargain in state government than the Department of Justice. And I will drive that point home with our final slide in our presentation. And this just reflects the money that the office brings in. So again, as I mentioned, our proposed budget right now in fiscal year 23 or 24 is roughly $43.8 million. Fiscal year 25 is 45 point something million. Sorry, forgetting the exact number. But these here are the recoveries in 2021 and 2022. That's calendar year 2021 and 2022. So $126.7 million recovered and deposited to the general fund, $6.8 million in Environmental Protection Bureau recovery. We manage $138.18 million in grant funds. So those aren't recoveries, but those are grants we go out and apply for and bring into the state. We keep some of it. We sub-grant out most of it. $2.79 million recovered for consumers. $52.7 million deposited into the Opioid Abatement Trust Fund. That's only so far. As we know, we'll have roughly $250 million to come in over the next 10 to 20 years in addition to that. And then $444,000 in state debts recovered. So that's the money that the office brings in for the state. So that is my presentation. Happy to answer any additional questions or provide any additional information.
Senator Rosenwald.
I have a couple of questions in two areas. One is about the SYSC sexual assault process, this
Yep.
civil process,
Yep.
not the criminal. Do you have, are you planning to expend more internal resources for attorneys or documents or expert witnesses over the next biennium that you're gonna see incurring costs? Do you have a projection?
Yeah, so that would go to our litigation fund request that, of course, will have to come to fiscal for.
fiscal,
Yep.
but-
Yep, but it's absolutely part of the budget. So our request to fiscal for the litigation fund for this past fiscal year was roughly $7.8 million, and that was approved. I expect we will ultimately spend less than that, and I do not expect that our request to fiscal in the upcoming fiscal year will be more than that. It could very well be less, but I do expect that a part of our litigation fund request, a significant part, will be for the YDC civil cases. I think that request was I think we asked for about $2 million last year. I expect that we'll be asking for more than that next fiscal year, but I don't expect it would be more than $4 million. So I would say probably between $2 and $4 million in the next fiscal year to support the defense of the civil cases. With that, I should point out, I think that will represent somewhat of a spike in the spending on those cases, because what's going to happen over the next year or so is us really cranking up our discovery work. As those cases now are starting to move forward, we're going to have to take a large tranche of documents that the state is in possession of and start reviewing them, coding them, and really preparing our responses to the plaintiff's discovery requests. That's going to be a lot of work, but once that work is done, it's done. That's not going to be an ongoing cost.
I assume we're budgeting our usual $300,000 for
Yeah.
the litigation fund. What about the outside law firm that you've hired? What do you think that's gonna bring into is that part of the $7 million?
Yes.
That
Yep.
you're expecting for okay.
Yes.
For the litigation fund draw from fiscal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And if I could just ask a question on
ahead.
a related, not unrelated subject. We've seen referrals to DCYF go up over the last 2 fiscal years. Where are the child advocacy centers funded in this giant book?
Yep. So
And what line are they in, and how much is the state putting in, and is it enough, considering that
I believe they get
the
100.
referrals are up?
Don't feel that you have to answer that question today.
Yep.
'cause
Okay.
Okay. We can get you that
Get back to
information.
me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
When you send it back, send it through
To
Deb,
Deb.
so the whole committee will get it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr.
Yep.
Chairman.
Senator D'Alessandro, you had a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's the average length of stay of an attorney at the Attorney General's office?
The average length of stay.
Right.
Well, I won't be able to give you the exact answer to
Just
that.
give me a
But
ballpark.
yep, there are a couple data points there. One is that traditionally the office has had a mix between attorneys who will come for a few years and attorneys who stay for a career. Any attorney who comes in, we ask for a 4-year minimum commitment, because it takes a year or two to really get fully trained, and then we like to get at least 2 to 3 years after that, after someone's fully trained. The best way to answer your question is to say the vast majority of attorneys meet that 4-year commitment. As to what the average stay is, I can't really give you an exact number on that without going back and calculating. But I think it's safe to say the average would come out somewhere between 4 and maybe pushing 10 years, somewhere in the middle of that, given that almost everyone stays for at least 4 years, and many people stay a lot longer than that. We are seeing more turnover now than we have in the past, but I think that's part of I would say that is part of a larger trend where people are they're moving around.
That was my next question. What's the turnover like now?
Yep.
At the department?
We've seen, in the 2 years I've been at the department, we have hired 38 lawyers. We have lost, I believe, 29. So we've had significant turnover in that we have had people leave, but we've also seen a lot of people very interested in coming. And so we're ahead of the curve. We've hired a lot, but we've had a lot of folks move on as well. Many to other, I include in that, Jane Young to be U.S. Attorney, Dan Will to be a judge. So I include everybody.
Right. Oh, it just would further, your availability. I know that I've been on the phone to you a few times and haven't received a reply. That bothers me a little because we've had a good rapport, good relationship over the years. And I wouldn't call you unless it was an incident that I thought I needed a reply on. And sometimes you don't get the message, but I think that's very important.
Yep. I agree with that, Senator. And I don't really have an excuse for you. I take full responsibility for that. There's a lot on the plate, but I will just say this, I'll just take full responsibility for that and I'll commit to being better. I try to be very responsive, but I'd rather not try to give you some excuse and just commit to doing better on that front.
And last question. The education suit that's now present, Ian has been with that for the beginning. Now, with her nomination to be a judge, who takes over that dossier?
Yep. So Ann Edwards, yes, has been nominated to the Superior Court. She has been involved in the case, but she actually, for the last 2 years or so, has not been leading the case. Sam Garland, the head of our civil litigation unit, Anthony Galtieri, our Solicitor General, and then another attorney in the civil litigation unit, Lawrence Gagnon, they're the lead trial team. So Ann's going to be a huge loss for the office. There's no question about that. But I think we're in a very good place with that case because she mostly transitioned off that case after it was remanded on appeal, and we knew we were going to have to prepare for a trial.
One last question. The money that's coming in from the latest settlement, the opioid settlement, some of that money is going directly to municipalities. How are we dealing with that?
So 15% of the money from any opioid settlements, it goes directly to certain municipalities, not every single one, but certain municipalities. When that comes in, we just cut checks to those municipalities. They get to spend the money. I mean, within the terms of the settlement agreement, it's up to them to spend that money in ways that they see fit. So we don't exercise a lot of oversight over that. We'll ask questions, but we just cut the checks right when the money comes in.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a comment. In the fiscal meeting we had this morning, Justice Broderick was there, said that he had some suggestions of how the office could be improved that would save money and funds. Certainly all of us are up to here in the budget, and I didn't know whether your office or some of the others that selected him for that position could meet with him. I'm interested in things that need legislative action that are good ideas to bring them forward, because if we wait until the budget's done when some of us have time, they're not going to get anywhere. So I'm looking for someone, and if you tell me you're the wrong one, that's fine, but hopefully you'll tell me who the right one is, because I need those meetings to happen, and then whether it's me and somebody from Democratic leadership to sit down and go over the ones that both Justice Broderick and your department support and get them taken care of. So.
And just to clarify, Senator, you're referring to the administrator's office, right? So for the settlement fund.
Yep.
Okay, great. One point of clarification on that, given that office is funded out of the settlement fund itself, I do think we can make changes and create efficiencies potentially without legislation, but we'll absolutely meet with him to get a sense of what suggestions he
And if
he
I
might
were-
have.
If I were 100% confident that you could do it without us, I'd pass it by. But right now, if there's one good idea out there that we can't do because we didn't know about it soon enough to tuck it here or tuck it there in a piece of legislation, then it's my fault and I could have done better.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think our last department for the day is anxious to get up here so that we can all go home. All right. All right, no problem. And your presentation should be on the back of the DOG presentation.
This group has such a big budget.
Whenever you're ready.
There's not much room, is there?
Good afternoon. My name is Ani Malachi, and I am the Executive Director for the Human Rights Commission. Just a quick overview, and you can follow along. Just as Senator Gray mentioned, our handful of slides is attached to the presentation provided by the Department of Justice. So the Human Rights Commission was established in 1965 by RSA 354A, and the purpose is to eliminate discrimination in New Hampshire. We have jurisdiction in the areas of housing, employment, public accommodation, and as of 2019, K through 12 education, and that's public education, so that's public schools, public charters, and public academies. The commission has 7 volunteer commissioners. They serve a 5-year term. They are nominated by the governor and confirmed by the executive council. And on to what we do. So briefly at the beginning, talked about the statutory responsibilities of the commission. And ultimately, the commission has the power to receive, investigate, and pass upon complaints of illegal discrimination. And another part of our statute is to engage in research, education, and community outreach. In addition to the authority that the commission has relative to RSA 354-A, we also have a work sharing agreement with the EEOC, and we work in tandem with them relative to workplace discrimination. If you turn over to the next page. So we have a very small yet mighty office. There are a total of 10 of us, including myself. So there's me as the executive director. There's an assistant director. We have 5 full-time investigators, and we have 1 full-time intake person. We have a part-time secretary, and we also have a paralegal for legal support. Really, our next to the last slide just goes over our numbers. It's an average of 2021 and 2022 in terms of the number of cases filed per month, the number of cases closed per month. Full credit means these are cases that we would have completed an investigation upon and submitted those for payment from the EEOC. We do have some cases that we would do an initial intake, and it may need to be waived to the EEOC for several different reasons. And we do have a small reimbursement fee for just the intake charges. However, we do get full credit and full payment for the investigations that we complete. Let's see. And work sharing agreement with the EEOC is a little different, our federal partner. We have what's called a reimbursement, so it's not like we're, you know, $1 million budget line, although that would be great. But we have a fee that they pay us, and that's the same fee that they pay across the country to all other agencies. Similar, some of the names are different, but that do the exact same work as us. And we have a contract for X number of cases per federal fiscal year. And as we complete those cases, we're able to voucher, and we receive those funds. The last slide that I have here, so in the initial round, the funding for the administrative assistant, the governor reinstated that for us, which is a much needed help. We also received approval for 3 of the 4 requested investigators. There's also funds for a move for us, and there's also the DOIT shared costs, and the remaining needs would be reinstatement for funding for the part-time intake coordinator. It's a robust position. There's a lot that individual is responsible for, and having an additional person in that office would complete the unit and make things flow a bit better. And also the addition of an informational representative and the info rep, and I know we're changing titles here, but what that person would be responsible for doing is spearheading all of our training. As it stands right now, any outside training that we do, it is myself or the assistant director that provides those trainings. We do have a cost associated, so that money does come in and goes into the general fund. However, if we had someone that was a full-time individual, not only could they take over the few trainings that we do, but they could absolutely make a robust program and stand up something that would bring in more revenue. And then the conversion of the part-time paralegal and the part-time secretary to full-time, and then that addition, excuse me, of 1 for the remaining for the remaining investigator. It's been a long day, and I think it's probably been longer for you all. So that's the end of the presentation. However, I do have an additional request. So with our lease where we are currently, our lease ends in October of this year. And we need to move to another location. There are conversations as to where we will end up. At this point, I don't know where we will be. However, regardless of wherever we go, we will need fit-up money. And so that was not in my original budget, and I am providing a guesstimate. So my thinking would be we would need another $300,000 in order to have the funds needed to fit up an office space. And also, it would be smart of us to add another $4,000 to our rent line, so it would go from $136,000 in year 1 to $140,000, because I don't know where we're going. So I'm not sure if we're going to be on a state property or if we will be leasing from a landlord. So that is all that I have, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have for me.
The money that the House gave you over the governor's budget, what did that fund?
It's all of the
Human Rights Commission, I'm on page 385 down at the bottom. Oh. Yeah.
What page was it?
Looks like.
The governor to House is 0 for human rights. It's, if you look at the second.
So I'm looking at the wrong thing. I'm on page 385
385 in the middle.
Right, but I went right to the bottom one.
Yeah, you went right to the bottom, which includes us.
Oh.
So they're administratively attached to us, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
I
That's okay.
get smarter all the time. It's been a long day.
So.
Senator D'Alessandro, it looked like you were gonna ask a question.
Yeah, the need for space, admin services should be the place to go. I mean, that's space allocation. They're in charge of all of the space. We do have, I presume we have some vacant space in the state. We've always had that. And I can tell you that for startup, just go over to the Brown Building and look at all of those empty spaces. There's plenty of material there, if indeed it's for an office or something of that nature. But I would say admin services is got to be the place to start, because they're in charge of that space allocation.
Yes, to respond.
We will take up your space needs when we go into executive session, because doing that right now.
I'm just.
Yep, I understand,
Just an ask.
Senator, and we will make sure that we do that.
Is there an opportunity to respond to that?
I'll let you respond.
Okay, thank you. Yes, you are more than absolutely correct. I started the conversation in May of last year relative to our space needs. At this point, we're in 3,500 square feet with the additional people, and with our process, we provide opportunities for hearings for people. We provide a free mediation program. We have conciliations. So we need the adequate space to do that. So we would need to almost double what we're requesting. We've had those conversations. Something that is a bit unique about what we do is, as we take charges of discrimination, it is important for the commission to be separate from other state entities. So, which is also why we are where we are. And needing the amount of space that we need, I'm not certain what is adequately available. There was initial conversation some time ago about the commission going into the same building with the Department of Justice. For quite a few reasons that does make sense, but I leave the execution of that to the wisdom of others. As we move forward with getting a HUD contract, there's one particular attorney. Because of statute, we cannot take those cases to court. So to be on a separate floor from the attorney who would be taking those to court, proximity is important. So
All right, we
for
won't
those
be
reasons.
responding to that. We are not noticed for an executive session. Executive session is where we would discuss the merits of the things that you wanted. Today is for clarifying question. Senator Innes has a clarifying question, I'm sure.
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'm looking at the case data on page 19, and it looks like you're not only keeping up but getting ahead. And I know historically there's been a little bit of a backlog. How does that look, and does the present level of staffing that you project in the budget enable you to keep that pace?
Yes. So thank you for the question. We are slowly but surely catching up. However, with the 5 investigators, what happens is cases come in, and sometimes we close more than we open, and sometimes it's the opposite.
Okay.
What is happening currently, unfortunately, we have over 200 cases that are waiting to be investigated.
That's a lot.
So, yes.
Yeah.
So a case comes in, everything is prompt. They have to wait until there's an investigator available to assign it to. However, once the investigation starts, they move pretty swiftly. With the additional investigators, we're able to assign out more, and then the process would move faster because you have more hands doing the work. Does it mean that we stop doing what we're doing? Does it mean that we stop being as efficient as possible? No. At the end of last year, we went through a large process internally, went through that with the staff to overhaul our internal process, began doing the new internal changes in February of last year. And within just a few short months, between February and September of last year, the staff closed an additional 55 more cases than what the contract was. So as a rule, what we do is, our contract is, I don't know, let's say it's 50 for the year. Especially because there are cases that are waiting. We do not just stop the work at the end of the contracted period. If our job is to end discrimination, we need to keep going. So that is what we do.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Great, thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Are there anything else the senators want or need, or?
An
Then our-
adjournment so we can go home.
Our business of the day being completed, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Senator. I know they